Oh, look at you. This is your aura. Your creativity grows and evolves. Your aura will change to reflect your activities. You can become a specialist at one aspect of dreams, or dabble in every area as you like. It can also help others find you, so you can combine your talents and make something amazing together. Now to explore the wider world of dream shaping. In a moment, you'll be creating and editing your own scenes in edit mode. Scenes are like levels in a game, or scenes in a movie. They're made up of elements. Elements are like props, sets, music, effects, and characters. Anything that you can build inside a scene and save to the Dreamiverse. Scenes are connected together to form dreams. And these dreams can be found when you go dream surfing.
you, what you looking at? What's up, do you have some of that? Bish, bash, bosh. What you looking at? Have some of that. You, what you looking at? What's up, do you have some of that? Bish, bash, bosh. What you looking at? Have some of that. You, what you looking at? What's up, do you have some of that? Bish, bash, bosh. What you looking at? Have some of that. You, what you looking at? What's up, do you have some of that? Bish, bash, bosh. What you looking at? Have some of that.
Look at you with your fancy motion controllers. Looks like you're ready to start wielding them like a first-class dream shaper. Make sure you follow the steps carefully if you want to get the most out of this tutorial. It's not just about getting to the end, it's the journey that counts. Shortly, you'll be in edit mode, creating and editing your own scenes. First, I'm going to show you how to move around a scene. Welcome to edit mode. You can see that we're in edit mode because the assembly mode icon is in the top left of the screen. If you ever need to remind yourself of the controls, select that icon with the X button on your primary controller for a reminder. And select it again to hide the controls. To give you something to do, I've hidden a puppet somewhere in this scene, which we'll need in later tutorials. I've left some clues to help you find it. Before we search for the first clue, let's start by looking around. You'll notice that there are two imps in the scene tracking the movement of your motion controllers. If you can't see them, just make sure that you're in front of your PlayStation camera, then hold down the start button on either motion controller until the imps reappear. You can do this at any time to recalibrate your imps if they feel too close, too far away, or off-center. My first clue is hidden somewhere on this island. We should probably look around these objects and see if we can find it. But they're quite large and far away. It would be a lot easier if our imps could reach further into the scene. Luckily, it's easy to change the reach of our imps to suit the objects we're working with. Remember I told you not to press both move buttons at the same time in the last step? Well, now's the time to do just that. Hold your imps so that their tips are either side of the shapes on the cloud. Then tap both move buttons at once. Don't hold them down this time. You'll see a circle with a number in it for a moment. That means your imp reach has changed. You'll notice that very little else will change, but don't hold them down this so that their tips are either side of the shapes on the cloud. Then tap both move buttons at once. Don't hold them down this time. You'll see a circle with a number in it for a moment. That means your imp reach has changed. You'll notice that very little else will change, but now your imps can easily reach the shapes on the cloud, as if they're at arm's length. In this tutorial, you're going to learn all about the exciting world of logic. Pay no attention to Cuthbert. It's not as complicated as it sounds. I promise. Let's check out the scene. See the buttons on the platforms in front of our good friend Connie? They activate the bridges that will take her to the next platform. At least that's what they're supposed to do. To get them working, you'll need to connect them to the gadgets that control them. You can't see gadgets when you're in play mode, but they let you do all sorts of useful things in edit mode. You can tell gadgets apart by their color and icons. Green gadgets are sensors and inputs. This one is what we call a trigger zone. It's one of the more versatile gadgets. It can trigger other gadgets when it detects something in the scene. Like in this case, Connie standing on the button. Hi, Connie! If you select the gadget with X, you'll be able to see its detection zone. That's it, right there above the button. Press the circle button to deselect the trigger zone, and let's look at the next gadget. Red gadgets are movers and outputs, meaning they make things happen in the scene. This particular gadget is a rotator, and it's connected to the first bridge. Click R3 to start time, and let's see what it does. Well, not a lot right now by the looks of it. That's because the rotator is switched off. You can tell because the gadget is dim at the moment. But if we connect these two gadgets together, we can turn the rotator on using the trigger zone. In the next step, I'll show you how. Before we start connecting things, make sure you can see both gadgets. You'll notice they have ports sticking out of their sides. Ports on the left are inputs, and the ones on the right are outputs. Hover over the output port on the trigger zone now. You'll see the word detected appear. That means that when the trigger zone detects something, this output will send a signal. Before it can send that signal to the rotator though, we'll need to connect them with a wire. So hover over the detected output and press R2 or X. You'll notice your imp is now tethered to the port by a wire. Power ports have appeared on the gadgets too. It's these ports that switch gadgets on or off. Okay, drag the wire over to the red rotator gadget. Now hover over the power port at the bottom, then press R2 or X. Once the gadgets are connected, the wire will disappear automatically. That way, your scene won't get cluttered. After all, you don't want wires all over the place. You can see the wire again by hovering over either gadget. Okay, time to test our connection out. So let's switch over to play mode in the options menu. That's more like it. Now the trigger zone detects Connie when she stands on the button and activates the rotator on the bridge. As soon as she steps off, the rotator stops working. You can use the button to get the bridge lined up with the platform. Once Connie can make it to the second platform, you can head back to edit mode and move on to the next step. Once Connie can make it to the second platform, you can head back to edit mode and move on to the next step. Now that we've connected the rotator, let's take a look at the second platform. See the white gadget on its side? This gadget isn't a sensor or an output. It's called a microchip. Microchips are used to organize logic in scenes. You can think of them as boxes of gadgets and wires. Let's have a look inside. Hover over this one with your imp. Hold L1 and press X. It's just like scoping into a group of objects. This window is the microchip's canvas. And if these gadgets look familiar, it's because they're two rotators. Each one controls half of this jointed drawbridge. Try to connect the output from the trigger zone to the power ports on the rotators. You can create multiple wires from the same output. Or you can clone wires in the scene by holding L1, then grabbing them with R2. Clone the wire near the rotator to create a new wire from the trigger zone. Once you've connected the trigger zone to the second rotator, switch over to play mode and make sure it's all working. Okay, jumping on the button now will activate the trigger zone and raise the drawbridge so that you can cross over the... Oh, wait a minute. The bridge has dropped down before Connie could cross. That's because the signal to the rotator stopped sending as soon as Connie stepped off the trigger zone. Switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. In the next step, I'll show you how to make signals stay on. If we want the bridge to stay up, we'll need to add a gadget between the trigger zone and the rotator to keep it activated. We can do this with a counter. So let's go into the assembly menu. Press square to open it if it's closed. Select the Gadgets menu with X. You'll find the counter in the Logic and Processing section. The gadgets in this menu take an input signal and change it in some way before sending it on. Go ahead and select the counter. Its icon is a tally counter. Now you can see the gadget on your imp. Hover over the microchip and it will snap to the canvas. Press R2 or X to stamp the counter onto the microchip, then press circle to unequip it. The counter gadget counts up or down whenever it receives a signal through its inputs. By default, it starts its count at 0 and has a target of 1. Once it reaches that target, it sends a constant signal through its counter-full output port. Before we connect it though, let's tidy up the wires connecting the trigger zone to the rotators. Just hover over them and press triangle to delete them. Now press R2 or X over the detected output of the trigger zone to create a new wire. Connect it to the increase count input port on the counter. That's the port with the plus sign icon. Now when the trigger zone is activated, the counter will go up to 1. And, this is the important part, it will stay at 1 even after the trigger zone deactivates. Now hover over the counter-full output port of the counter. This port sends a signal when the counter reaches its target. Create a wire with R2 or X and connect it to one of the rotator's power ports. Then do the same for the other one. Time to switch to play mode and try out our new connections. Just one more bridge for Connie to cross. As you can see, we have another microchip on the platform, so let's open it up. Hover over it with your imp, hold L1 and press X. Okay, looks like we have everything we need here. But Connie's an adventurer, so how about we make this last bridge more challenging? Adding a timer to the logic should get the adrenaline going. Once Connie activates the button, she'll only have a few seconds to cross before the bridge drops back down. Let's head back to the assembly menu. If it isn't already open, press square. Then go into the Gadgets section. You'll find the timer in the same place as the counter, the Logic and Processing section. Its button has a clock face on it. Now go ahead and stamp the timer gadget onto the microchip with R2 or X. Then unequip it from your imp with the circle button. Now let's take a closer look at the timer's inputs and outputs. You can see their names by hovering over the ports. The first input is a start timer port. Once this receives a signal, it will start the clock. The second one is reset timer, which sets the time back to 0. Over on the output side, we have timer finished and timer output. Timer finished sends a signal when the timer reaches the required number. It's set to 5 seconds by default. Timer output is a little more sophisticated. The signal it sends represents the timer's current progress. If, let's say, it's only halfway to its target, the signal it sends will be half strength. So how do we connect this so the bridge only stays up for a few seconds? Well, we need the bridge to be raised while the timer is running. So create a wire on the timer output with R2 or X. Remember how we used the counter on the previous platform? We can use one here too. Just like before, connect the wire to the counter's increase count input. Then connect the counter full output to the rotator's power port. Time to see if it works. Click R3 to test it out. As you can see, since the timer isn't connected to a trigger yet, the clock starts ticking as soon as we play the scene. The bridge goes up, but doesn't drop down when the timer finishes. That can only mean one thing. There's a problem with the logic. If you'd like to figure it out for yourself, feel free to check the gadgets and see what's wrong. Or move on to the next step and we'll go through it together. So let's take a look at why the bridge stayed up after the timer finished instead of going back down. Remember how we used the counter earlier to remember the signal from the trigger zone? Well, now it's remembering the signal from the timer, so we need to make it forget that once the timer finishes. Let's go over to the counter gadget. Hover over the inputs to see their names. This one here is Reset Count. It'll put the counter back to 0, which will turn off the rotator. So all we need to do is connect it to the timer, but to which output? Aha! There we go. We can use the timer finished output. Hover over it and create a wire with R2 or X. Then stretch the wire over to the counter and connect it to the reset count input. But we also need to reset the timer, otherwise the logic will only work once. So let's get another wire from the timer finished output and connect this one to the reset timer input. You'll recognize it by the rewind symbol on it. All we have left to do is to connect the trigger zone to the start timer port so Connie can activate it. In this tutorial, you'll use logic to make health go up and go down. Oh, Cuthbert. Let's start by going into play mode. See if you can get Connie across that first gap. Oops. Sorry, Connie. I forgot to fix that. Don't worry though, even after falling such a long way, Connie's just fine. There's only one problem. There's no way for her to get back up. What we need is for Connie to respawn on a platform if she falls. So that's going to be our next job. First, switch back to edit mode. Remember to rewind time with L3, as we always do after play mode. In order to make Connie respawn, we're going to use a health modifier gadget. We'll use it to make the floor around the platforms lethal. Health modifiers can damage or heal anything that has a health manager. And, as luck would have it, Connie has one built into her logic. Go to the assembly menu. Open it with the square button if it's closed. Select the Gadgets menu, the one with the 3 connected squares. You'll find the health modifier select the button that has a clockwork heart on it. Your imp will now be equipped with a health modifier gadget. Stamp it somewhere central, near the floor, using R2 or X. Equipped with a health 3 connected logic. Go to the Assembly menu. Open it with the square button if it's closed. Select the Gadgets menu, the one with the 3 connected squares. You'll find the health modifier in the Movers and Output section, which is represented by a box with an arrow. Now select the button that has a clockwork heart on it. Your imp will now be equipped with a health modifier gadget. Stamp it somewhere central, near the floor, using R2 or X. Then unequip the gadget with circle. Your scene now has a health modifier, but to make it work as intended, we'll have to tweak it first. We'll do that in the next step. In this tutorial, let's go ahead and open the Health Modifiers Tweak menu. Hover over it, hold L1 and press square. Here you can set the options for how the health modifier works. That includes how much health is modified, which is shown in the first slider. Right now, it's set to -100. This means it will take 100 health points away from anything it affects. Just enough to make Connie respawn. The modifier mode is set to per hit, so 100 health points will be taken away when anything touches it. But since we want the area around the platforms to be lethal, we need to set the modifier type to zone. Select the zone icon with X now, then go to the Zone Properties tab so we can change its size and shape. The icon is at the top of the menu and looks like a box in a zone. Look for the Zone Shape section of the menu, then select the cube. You can use the zone sliders to make the zone bigger. Be careful not to make it too tall. The respawn zone should be level with the pink lines around the platforms. If you need to, move the health modifier gadget nearer to the floor. When you hover over the edges of the zone, you'll see white arrow gizmos appear. Grabbing these with R2 will let you change the size of the zone. Using those, you can make sure the area around the platforms is covered. Now let's test it in play mode and see what happens. Perfect. If Connie falls off now, she'll just respawn back on the platform. Before we move on, maybe we should do something about this booby-trapped bridge. Switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. There. See what's causing it? It's that trigger zone. When Connie activates it, the bridge collapses and there's no way across. If you've finished the first logic tutorial, you'll know that the counter is being used to remember the trigger zone has been activated. If you follow the wires, you'll see there's one connected to each block. These red dots on the blocks are not gadgets. They show that a wire is connected to a setting in the block's tweak menu. Explore the logic for yourself. Or, if you want to move on and get Connie on her way, just delete the trigger zone by pressing triangle over it. That'll prevent any of the logic from activating. Then, once Connie can safely make it to the second platform, move on to the next step. Now's probably a good time to show you how to add checkpoints. When playable characters like Connie activate a checkpoint, the scene remembers their progress. So when they respawn, they'll appear at the last checkpoint instead of starting off at the beginning. The icon is nearer to the floor. You'll see white arrow gizmos appear. No way across. If you've finished the first logic tutorial, you'll know that the counter is being used to remember the trigger zone has been activated. If you follow the wires, you'll see there's one connected to each block. These red dots on the blocks are not gadgets. They show that a wire is connected to a setting in the block's tweak menu. Explore the logic for yourself. Or, if you want to move on and get Connie on her way, just delete the trigger zone by pressing triangle over it. That'll prevent any of the logic from activating. Then, once Connie can safely make it to the second platform, move on to the next step. Make it to the second. Now's probably a good time to show you how to add checkpoints. When playable characters like Connie activate a checkpoint, the scene remembers their progress. So when they respawn, they'll appear at the last checkpoint instead of starting off at the beginning. Go to the Assembly menu, then the Gadgets menu. If the last section you used is still open, close it by pressing circle over it. Expand the Gameplay Gear section with X, then select the checkpoint. It's the one that looks like a location marker. There. Now your imp is equipped with a checkpoint gadget. The direction of a checkpoint determines which way a character will face when it respawns. So make sure the front of the gadget, the side with the black outline, is facing the direction you want Connie to face. Remove the gadget from your imp with the circle button, then open the Checkpoints Tweak menu. Checkpoints use a detection zone, just like health modifiers. So select the Zone Size tab from the menu. This is set to a sphere by default, but to make sure it can't be missed, let's change it to a cube. You can use the zone size sliders to make the checkpoint cover the width of the platform. Above the gadget, you'll see a white Move gizmo. Grab it with R2 to put the activation zone where you want it. Just make sure Connie can't miss it. The white handle shows the direction Connie will face when she Let's modify gadget from your imp with the circle button, then open the Checkpoints Tweak menu. Checkpoints use a detection zone, just like health modifiers. So select the Zone Size tab from the menu. This is set to a sphere by default, but to make sure it can't be missed, let's change it to a cube. You can use the zone size sliders to make the checkpoint cover the width of the platform. Above the gadget, you'll see a white Move gizmo. Grab it with R2 to put the activation zone where you want it. Just make sure Connie can't miss it. The white handle shows the direction Connie will face when she respawns. Check that it's pointing the right way. Grab it with R2 if you need to adjust it. Let's close that tweak menu with L1 and circle. Now try it out in play mode to see if the checkpoint remembers your progress. Sorry, Connie. We're gonna have to respawn you again. But it's all in the name of science, I promise. Great, there she is, right at the checkpoint again. When you're ready, go back to edit mode, rewind time, and move on to the next step. This next bridge looks a bit too hot to walk on. But Connie's a tough explorer, and she's always ready for danger, so let's give it a go. Okay, that block's too big for Connie to jump over. Better get her back to safety before it's too late. Let's switch back to edit mode and see how the bridge is damaging Connie. Move closer to the bridge and keep an eye out for any gadgets attached to it. Ah, there's one. A clockwork heart icon, so it's another health modifier. It looks like, instead of using a zone, this one is attached to the bridge. So whenever Connie walks on it, she loses health. If only that block wasn't in the way, she could make it across. But what if the block itself could lose health? We could give it a health manager of its own and see how that works out. Go to the Assembly menu, then open the Gadgets menu. You may need to close the Gameplay Gear section if you opened it earlier. Then you can expand the Movers and Output section. Look for a heart icon, not the clockwork heart this time. Select it with X to give your imp a health manager gadget. Stamp one near the block with R2 or X, then press circle to unequip it from your imp. To make the health manager affect the block, we'll need to attach it. The easiest way to attach gadgets to objects is to use what we call Surface Snap. Grab the health manager with R2 and hold it over the block. All you have to do to activate Surface Snap is hold L1 while your imp holds the gadget. This makes it hug the surface of any object you hover over. Now release R2 to attach the gadget to the block. You can also let go of L1 to stop using Surface Snap. In the next step, I'll show you how to tweak this health manager. Gadget Snap is hold L1 while your imp holds the gadget. This makes it hug the surface of any object you hover over. Now release R2 to attach the gadget to the block. You can also let go of L1 to stop using Surface Snap. In the next step, I'll show you how to tweak this health manager. Now that we've given the block health, let's take a closer look at it. Hover over the health manager, hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. The sliders here define the block's maximum and current health. Click R3 to play time, and you'll see the health start. starts to go down. That's because the bridge's health modifier is damaging it. But you'll notice it's going down much slower than Connie's health was when she was on the bridge. The reason for that is this health manager has a 1-second cooldown. So whenever the block takes damage, it's invulnerable for 1 second after that. Grab the cooldown slider with X and pull it to the left with your imp. So what happens when it reaches 0? Not a lot right now. But we can deal with that in the next step. For now, feel free to experiment with An object doesn't automatically get destroyed when it runs out of health, so we need to do a bit more work before we can get rid of that block. Let's take a closer look at its health manager. If its tweak menu is still open, close that first with L1 and circle. See the output ports on its right edge. Hover over the one at the bottom, the one that has a heart with a cross over it. This is the no health output, which sends a signal when the health manager is depleted. It can be used to trigger any number of things, but right now, we're going to use it to destroy the block. Go to the assembly menu and take a look in the gadget section. It may still be open from earlier, when you selected the health manager. Look for a skull icon on a button in the Move as an Output section and select it with X. This is the Destroyer gadget. It destroys whatever it's attached to. To attach it to the block, we can use Surface Snap. So hover the Destroyer over the block, hold L1 to make it Surface Snap, and press R2 or X to stamp it. Now you can unequip the Destroyer gadget with Circle. Okay, before we connect it up, let's just see if it works by clicking R3. Oh, it works all right. When time is running, the Destroyer activates and destroys the block. Rewind time with L3 to bring it back. We don't want the Destroyer to activate until the block's health has run out. To do that, we'll need to connect the no health output port to the Destroyer's power. So hover your imp over the health manager's no health output port and press R2 or X to create a wire. This will make power ports appear on the gadgets in the scene. Stretch the wire over to the Destroyer and connect it to the power port with R2 or X. Great! Time to test it again with R3 and see what happens. When the block's health runs out, it will get destroyed, leaving the path clear for Connie. But how do we know how much health the block has left? We could always look at its tweak menu, but you can't see that in play mode. So click L3 to rewind time, and I'll show you how to display health in the next step. If the Health Manager's tweak menu isn't open already, open it now with L1 and square. When you hover over the menu sliders and buttons, you'll see ports popping out of the side. These work just like the ones on the outside of the gadget. But there are a lot more of them. And you might also have noticed that there's another gadget stamped on the side of the block. That's a number displayer. If we connect a wire from the current health output to the number displayer's input port, we'll be able to see the block's health count down in play mode. So let's go ahead and do that. Hover over the current health slider's output port. Then press R2 or X to create a wire and stretch it to the number displayer. Once you've connected it to its input with R2 or X, you can switch over to play mode and test out the whole scene so far. Excellent. Now we can see the block taking damage until it's destroyed. Once you can get Connie to the next platform, switch back to edit mode and move on to the next step. An object doesn't automatically get destroyed when it runs out of health, so if the Health Manager's tweak menu isn't open, menu sliders and buttons, you'll see ports popping out of the side. These work just like the ones on the outside of the gadget, but there are a lot more of them. And you might also have noticed that there's another gadget stamped on the side of the block. That's a number displayer. If we connect a wire from the current health output to the number displayer's input port, we'll be able to see the block's health count down in play mode. So let's go ahead and do that. Hover over the current health slider's output port. Then press R2 or X to create a wire and stretch it to the number displayer. Once you've connected it to its input with R2 or X, you can switch over to play mode and test out the whole scene so far. Excellent. Now we can see the block taking damage until it's destroyed. Once you can get Connie to the next platform, switch back to edit mode. Hover over the current health slider's output port. Then press R2 or X to create a wire and stretch it to the number displayer. Once you've connected it to its input with R2 or X, you can switch over to play mode and test out the whole scene so far. Excellent. Now we can see the block taking damage until it's destroyed. Once you can get Connie to the next platform, switch back to edit mode and move on to the next step. Well, Connie made it through, but she's a bit worse for wear. The burn effect you see on her is triggered by the current health output from her health manager. It gives you a visual cue of her health. The more singed she gets, the less health she has. I'm not sure poor Connie has enough health left to make it across the last bridge. What she needs is a bit of healing. So let's create a healing zone where she can recharge. This green pad looks like a good place to recover. We can turn it into a healing zone by placing a health modifier on it, using Surface Snap. You've used Surface Snap before, so this should be no problem. Go to the Assembly menu and select a health modifier from the Movers and Output menu. It's the one with the clockwork heart on it, remember? Now activate Surface Snap by holding L1. Then attach the health modifier to the green pad. Now you can unequip the gadget with the circle button and open the modifier's tweak menu. We need to change it so it heals Connie. The health modifier is set to -100 by default, which won't do Connie any good. She has 100 health to start with, so that will take it all away and make her respawn. Grab the slider with X, drag it right, and set it to +20. We want the healing zone to heal Connie while she's standing on it, so you also need to set the modifier mode to continuous. You can leave the modifier type as impact, since you've snapped the health modifier to the platform. And that's all there is to it. Close the tweak menu with L1 and circle, and give it a try in play mode. All right. That should give Connie the health boost she needs to cross that final bridge. Oh, she's been through a lot today, so take her through the door to end this tutorial. So let's take a look at why the bridge stayed up after the timer finished instead of going back down. Remember how we used the counter earlier to remember the signal from the trigger zone? Well, now it's remembering the signal from the timer, so we need to make it forget that once the timer finishes. Let's go over to the counter gadget. Hover over the inputs to see their names. This one here is Reset Count. It'll put the counter back to 0, which will turn off the rotator. So all we need to do is connect it to the timer, but to which output? Aha! There we go. We can use the timer finished output. Hover over it and create a wire with R2 or X. Then stretch the wire over to the counter and connect it to the reset count input. But we also need to reset the timer, otherwise the logic will only work once. So let's get another wire from the timer finished output and connect this one to the reset timer input. You'll recognize it by the rewind symbol on it. All we have left to do is to connect the trigger zone to the start timer port so Connie can activate it. So, on the third platform, we've set up a timer that makes the bridge drop after 5 seconds. But I think that might be too easy for a seasoned pro like Connie. Let's make it a little bit more challenging. First, if you're in play mode, switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. Let's move in closer to the microchip with the timer. You can use the grab cam, R1, to move your view. Now I'll show you how to tweak a gadget's settings. Hover over the timer gadget, hold L1 and press square. This tweak menu contains the settings for the timer. Hover over the sliders and buttons to see their names. The top slider sets the target time for the timer. If we lower this setting, the bridge will stay up for a shorter time. To adjust the value, hover your imp over the slider, then hold X. Use your imp to drag the slider left or right. Set it to around 3 seconds. It doesn't have to be exact. If you're a stickler for precision, you can adjust the slider incrementally using the up and down directional buttons. Just hover your imp over the slider and press up or down to tweak the value. In fact, why don't we make things really interesting for Connie? Let's set it to 2.5 seconds. You can close the tweak menu now by selecting the cross in the top corner with X. Or you could use a shortcut. Just hold L1, then press circle while hovering over the menu to close it quickly. The same shortcut works for closing microchips. Give it a try now. Hold L1, then hover your imp over the microchip and press circle. Time to test out the scene in play mode. If you have any problems crossing that last bridge, you can always tweak the timer again in edit mode. Remember, you just hover over the gadget, hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. When you're all set, take Connie to the last platform and walk through the door to complete this tutorial. This tutorial is all about connectors. Something Cuthbert hasn't quite got the hang of. Connectors join objects together in a way that lets them move. We're going to use them to help Connie get to Cuthbert. First things first, though, we need to be precise when using connectors, so let's turn on the Grid Snap guide. That way, everything will line up properly. So, go to the Assembly menu and open the Guides section. Now select the grid icon with the X button. Now that Grid Snap is on, any objects you move and tools you use will snap in line with the grid in the scene. You can adjust how fine the grid is using the plus and minus icons on the button. But for this tutorial, it's best if you leave the grid size at 1. Now, let's see how we can make our way to Cuthbert. The best way to find out what needs to be connected is to play the scene and see for ourselves. But instead of switching over to play mode, we can start time in edit mode by clicking R3. Aha! Well, this is odd. The bridge has fallen down, but the second platform is still floating in place. Why is one object floating while the other is falling? Click L3 to rewind time. Let's check the bridge's tweak menu. Remember, tweak menus allow us to see and change the settings for objects in edit mode. Hover your imp over the bridge, hold L1 and press the square button to open its tweak menu. Tweak menus differ depending on what sort of object you're tweaking. The bridge is a sculpture. Sculptures are pretty complex things, and their tweak menus have lots of pages. To switch pages, use your imp to select the different tabs at the top. Maybe we'll find something on the physical properties page to tell us why the bridge is falling down. Its icon is a Newton's cradle, like one of those desk ornaments where the metal balls bash into each other. Select it with X. This page contains the sculpture's physical properties and attributes. There are lots of buttons and sliders here, but the one we're interested in is the top one. Aha! I thought so. Someone's gone and switched on the movable option. Okay, I admit it. It was me. Well, it wouldn't be much of an adventure if Connie could just stroll across the bridge, would it? Making something movable means it becomes physical. That means that forces in the scene, like collisions, the imp, or in this case gravity, can move it. Luckily, we can stop the bridge from falling down by adding a connector to it, which is exactly what we'll do in the next step, once you're ready to move on. So, all we need to keep the bridge from falling is a piece of string. Not just any piece of string, though. It's what we in the dream shaping business call a string connector. We'll need to attach the other end to something unmovable, like the blue cylinder above the bridge. Start by moving your imp with the left and right sticks until you can see the top of the bridge and the bottom of the blue cylinder. Make sure time is rewound. Click L3 if it isn't. Now open the Assembly menu and select the 3 connected squares to open the Gadgets menu. Look for the button with the joint icon, which will take you to the Connectors sub-menu. You can move the menu with your imp by grabbing it with R2. Select the String button. Its icon is the 2 circles connected by a wavy line. You'll see that a string connector appears on the tip of your imp. Now let's get connecting. You should always make the first connection from the object that won't move. We call this the parent object. In this case, it's the blue cylinder, But it could be something else, like the frame of a door. See the yellow dot on the cylinder? I put that there to show the best place for a connection. So hover over it and press R2 or X to connect the string. The grid snap guide will help you line it up exactly with the yellow spot. When you move your imp now, you'll notice it's tethered to the cylinder. It also has a blue gizmo on the end of it. Now let's stretch that string down to the bridge, all the way to the blue dot. The blue gizmo connects the string to the movable object, which we call the child object. Hover over the blue dot. See how the grid snaps it into line? Let's connect the string there with R2 or X. If your bridge isn't in line, just make sure that time is rewound. Now that the blue gizmo is connected, you can press the circle button to unequip the string connector from your imp. And there you have it. The cylinder and the bridge are connected. Click R3 to start time and check that it's working. Well, it looks a bit wobbly, but it's nothing Connie can't handle. Switch over to play mode and have a go. When you can get Connie across the bridge to the second platform, return to edit mode and rewind time with L3. Time to get Connie over to the third platform. So, the small pink platform and the blue step aren't much use to her right now. But if we make the platform move backwards and forwards, she can hop onto it and cross over. To do that, we'll need a connector called a piston. Go to the Assembly menu, then the Gadgets menu. You'll find the piston in the Connectors section. It's somewhere near the middle and looks like, well, a piston. Now that it's equipped on your imp, you can start connecting. First, press R2 or X to join it to the blue step, which is unmovable, so it's the parent object. I've put a yellow dot on it to show you the best place to connect it. Next, connect the blue end to the child object, which is the floating platform. See how Grid Snap keeps the connector perfectly straight? Hover over the blue dot, then press R2 or X. Remember, the child object is the part that needs to be able to move. So when you join a connector to its child, that object will automatically become movable. When you've placed the piston, press circle to unequip it. Click R3 to test the connector. That's more like it. The piston is now moving the platform back and forth. Rewind time with L3. Now Connie might not be too happy if we make her jump on that, so let's calm the piston down a bit. First, open the piston's tweak menu. Hover anywhere over it, hold L1 and press square. If the tweak menu blocks your view of the piston, you can grab it and move it with R2. This white gizmo shows the maximum length and speed of the piston. You can change the speed by adjusting the slider with the clock icon. That's the cycles per minute. Grab the slider by holding X over it with your imp and reduce the value. The further to the left you move, the faster the number will change. It doesn't need to be exact. Somewhere around 15 should do it. But if you want to get a more precise number, you can adjust the slider with the up and down directional buttons instead. Notice how it's slowed down now. Click R3 to see it moving the platform. When you're happy with the speed, close the tweak menu with the close button or use L1 and circle. Then rewind time with L3. Time to switch over to play mode and test out the scene so far. Make sure the platform isn't moving too fast for Connie to jump on. You can always go back to edit mode and tweak the piston until you're happy with it. Once Connie has made it all the way across, rewind time in edit mode and move on to the next step. Alright, there's just one more gap for Connie to cross. We have a plank and a step to attach it to. For the plank to drop down, we'll need it to pivot like a hinge, which means we'll need to use a bolt connector this time. Go into the connectors section in the assembly menu. Select the icon with the nut on it. That's the bolt connector. Now you can connect it just like you did with the string and the piston. And because I'm so nice, I've placed some yellow and blue dots and a sneaky new purple one so that you can see where to make the connections. They're quite close together this time, so move in closer for a good view. Remember, you can use the grab cam on the R1 button to zoom in close. As always, connect the parent object first, the yellow dot. Then you can connect the child object, the blue dot. The grid snap will keep the bolt in a straight line so you don't have to worry about it. Once it's all connected, you can unequip the bolt connector using the circle button. You've probably noticed that there's a purple gizmo halfway along the bolt. That's the pivot which the bolt rotates around. Click R3 to see how it all works. Well, that's not right. It looks like we'll need to reposition the pivot to get the plank moving correctly. Click L3 to rewind time and reset the plank. Now go ahead and grab the purple gizmo with R2. Move it so it's by the purple dot. While you're grabbing the pivot gizmo with R2, press triangle to align it to the grid. Now grab it with L2 and use the sticks to rotate it so its axis goes through the bottom of the plank. The grid snap guide will help you line it up exactly. The child object, in this case the plank, will rotate around that axis. Once it's all lined up, switch over to play mode to test it out. If you've done it correctly, the plank should balance upright. Connie will need to push the plank down, unless, of course, the plank isn't long enough. Oh well, switch back to edit mode and rewind time. We'll sort out the plank in the next step. To make sure Connie can reach the last platform, we could always make the plank longer, but that's a completely different tutorial. Instead, let's try restricting the bolt's movement. We can do that by giving it an angle limit. First, you'll need to bring up the bolt's tweak menu. So hover over any part of the bolt, hold L1 and press square. You should see the Use Limits button about halfway down. Select it with X. And look at that. 3 handles have appeared. 2 pale yellow ones and a longer pale blue one. The yellow ones set the range of movement, which is represented by the transparent arc between them. We need to move one of these yellow handles so it's just a little bit left of vertical. It should look like an 11 o'clock position. Now move the other yellow handle to a 3 o'clock position. If your handle doesn't line up exactly, just press triangle while you're grabbing it. This will realign the handle to the grid. The blue handle represents the position of the child object, so you need to line it up with the plank in the 12 o'clock position. Press triangle to realign the handle to the grid if necessary. You can close the tweak menu now and head into play mode to test the scene. If everything's working correctly, Connie should be able to reach Cuthbert. And if you feel like experimenting, you can try out some other connector types. See what you can come up with. Then, when you're done editing the scene, go through the door in play mode to finish this tutorial. It looks like Cuthbert is in a spot of bother. Connie needs our help to get across these platforms so she can rescue Cuthbert. So how about we add a little handmade animation to get her there? You don't need to go into play mode to see that Connie won't be able to make this jump. So let's animate that floating ledge down to her using an action recorder. Action recorders are super easy to use. Just stamp one in your scene, and it will record anything you move with the imp. And we mean anything. It'll even record you moving or tweaking gadgets. We'd better get going. Connie's getting really impatient. You know what cones are like. Go to the assembly menu. Press a square button if it's not already open. Then head to the animate menu. The animate icon is a clapperboard, that thing they use in movies before the director says, action. Now you get to be the director, and you can use these tools and gadgets to animate objects. Select the action recorder, the icon with a film strip and a plus sign on it. You'll now have an action recorder gadget on your imp. Stamp it down, somewhere near the floating ledge. A progress bar will appear at the top of the screen, along with a record button on the right. Also, your imp will turn red. This means you're ready to start recording. Don't worry, recording won't start until you begin moving or changing things. When you're ready, grab the floating ledge with R2. Move it slowly towards Connie using the motion sensor function or the sticks. You'll notice that the bar starts to fill, recording your every move. Don't worry, it's not a time limit. The bar fills up as a visual indicator of something being recorded, so take your time. When you let go of R2, the recording will pause. If you move your view or use the grab cam, that won't be recorded. But if you've started time with R3, recording will continue when you let go of R2. That's why it's important to rewind or pause time before recording anything. That way, your action recorder only contains what you put into it. When you've finished recording, select the Stop Recording button in the context menu. Or you can use the shortcut L1 and circle button to exit the action recorder. Your imp will go back to normal to show that recording has stopped. Click R3 to play back your animation. Handmade animations are always a bit wobbly, but practice makes perfect. Calibrating your imp can help when using the motion sensor function. Just hold your controller in a comfortable position, then hold the Options button for a few seconds. In the next step, I'll show you how to edit a recorded animation. Anything you record is stored in the action recorder gadget. If you hover over the floating ledge, the action recorder will pulse. Select the action recorder with X, and dashed lines will appear on the objects animated with it. It'll also show the animation path. That's this dashed line. If you're not happy with your animation, redoing it is easy. First, rewind time with L3. Then hover over the action recorder gadget, hold L1 and press X. Now we can start recording again. Select the retake button in the context menu to replace the old animation. Now you can record a new one. Move the platform so it stops in front of Connie. You can undo actions you perform using the left directional button, but it won't undo any time that has passed. So it's better to use the retake button to undo animations. Move the floating ledge from the upper platform down to Connie. Don't worry if the animation's too slow or too fast. We can fix that later. Make sure you press the stop recording button when you're done. Spend a little time practicing with the action recorder. In the next step, I'll show you how to tweak your animation. Another way to edit animations is to tweak them. Hold L1 and press the square button over the action recorder gadget to open its tweak menu. Here you can see all the tweaks for the action recorder. By default, the playback mode is set to loop, so it plays the animation over and over again. But you can set them to play once, sustain, or to ping pong. Once will play the whole animation just one time. Sustain will play the animation for as long as the action recorder has power. If it loses power, it will stop. Then it will continue from that point when it's powered again. Ping pong plays the animation forward once, and then plays it in reverse. Then forward, then backwards, and so on. That sounds like a good option for our floating ledge. Select ping pong with X. Click R3 to start time and play the animation. You can also change the animation speed to make it slower or faster. Grab the slider with X and use your imp to change the speed. If you want to explore more of the action recorder tweaks, you can. If you hover over any button for a few seconds, a more info tip will explain what that tweak does. To close the tweak menu, just hold L1 and press the circle button anywhere over it. And of course, you can undo any changes you make by pressing the left directional button. Switch to play mode to test your changes. When you're ready, come back to edit mode and start the next step. Now that Connie's made it up to the higher platform, how will she get back down to the next one? First, rewind time with L3. You probably already know about cloning objects, but do you know that you can clone their animations along with them? I'm sure you remember how to clone, but if not, just hold L1 and grab the ledge you animated with R2. Once you've made the clone, release L1, then move the ledge to the other side and release R2 to place it. Not only did you clone the ledge, but you also cloned its animation. Click R3 to start time. Now we just need to flip it so that it moves in the correct direction. First, make sure you rewind time. Grab the platform with R2. Then click L3 to flip it horizontally. Depending on where you grabbed it, you might have to move it closer to the other platform after flipping. You may also need to realign it with triangle before releasing R2 to put it back down. Now click R3 to start time and the platforms should move in opposite directions. Closer to correct direction. First, make sure you rewind time. Grab the platform with R2. Then click L3 to flip it horizontally. Depending on where you grabbed it, you might have to move it closer to the other platform after flipping. You may also need to realign it with triangle before releasing R2 to put it back down. Now click R3 to start time, and the platforms should move in opposite directions. Both animations are stored in the same action recorder. So if you retake or delete the action recorder, it will affect both animations. Now go into play mode and see if Connie can make it across both gaps. Switch back to edit mode when you're ready to move on. Now let's get Connie to Cuthbert and get them through the door, before Cuthbert has a total meltdown. I've placed a shiny helper cube. Let's call it Cuthbot. That holds up the next platform. But it's not very animated at the moment. To get it to walk back and forth towards the exit, we need to use Record Possession. It allows you to possess puppets and record a performance with them. Open the Assembly menu, then go to the Animate menu. Select Record Possession. It's the button with the sock puppet icon. Your imp can now possess the puppets in the scene. In the Context menu, you'll see the Count-In button. When this is selected, you'll get a 3-second count-in before recording starts. Press R2 over the Cuthbot to possess the puppet and start the countdown. When the count reaches 0, the possession recorder begins recording. Unlike the action recorder, it records constantly. So time will be recorded even when the cube isn't moving. Walk the Cuthbot around the obstacles to the final platform. Pause for a moment, turn around, then walk back to where the Cuthbot started. Starting and ending at the same place will help to make the animation loop smoothly. Press the circle button to depossess. You'll notice that the recording pauses when you depossess. Select Stop Recording in the Context menu to exit the possession recorder. Once you've stopped recording, click L3 to rewind time, then R3 to start time, and watch what you've recorded. In the last step, I'll show you how to edit the recorded possession. You may have noticed a possession recorder gadget has appeared next to the Cuthbot. When you're using Record Possession, this gadget appears the moment you press the Stop Recording button. Select it with X to view the animation path. The Possession Recorder gadget also lets you edit and tweak the animation. Hold L1 and press X over the Possession Recorder to scope in and edit it. Just like the action recorder, you can choose to retake the animation by selecting the button in the Context menu. To stop editing the Possession Recorder, select Stop Recording in the Context menu. Or hold L1 and press the circle button to quickly scope out. You can also tweak the Possession Recorder with L1 and the square button. It has exactly the same options as the action recorder. Experiment with the recorder and the different tweak options. Remember, you can see more info about the tweak settings by hovering over them for a few seconds. Close the tweak menu by pressing L1 and the circle button anywhere over it. Once you're done editing, switch over to play mode to test out the completed scene. Then Connie can navigate to the last platform and help Cuthbert through the door to complete the tutorial. You might be able to animate wobbly platforms with the action recorder, but keyframes are where animation gets serious. Nice try, Cuthbert, but leave the dream shaping to the experts. We're going to use keyframes to animate the platforms so Connie can reach the exit. A keyframe records any changes you make to an object, such as its position, tweak menu settings, or anything else you can think of. Then it stores those changes in a gadget that you can switch on and off. Okay, let's use keyframes to help Connie get across those platforms. First, go to the assembly menu. If it's closed, press the square button to open it. Look for the Animate button, which has a clapperboard icon, and click on that. Start by selecting the keyframe gadget, which is the one with the diamond and the plus sign. Then stamp it in the scene above the first gap. You'll notice there's now a stop recording button in the context menu, and your imp now looks like a red keyframe. That means the keyframe gadget is recording any changes you make in the scene. But unlike the action recorder, it only records the state of things, not a period of time. It's probably easier to understand if we put it into practice. Let's try it on the block that's on the ground in front of Connie. Grab it with R2 and place it between the first two platforms. You'll see some dashed lines appear on the block. These tell you that the keyframe has recorded the change you've made to the object. You can move it as many times as you like. It'll only store the final result. If that's not the outcome you wanted, you can always undo your last change with the left directional button. The next bit is super important. To finish and store your changes in the keyframe, you need to select the Stop Recording button in the context menu. Select it now and see what happens. That's right. The block has snapped back to its original position. That's because the keyframe isn't active right now. But we can still see what's recorded by selecting the gadget with X. There, the block is back to where you moved it. You'll notice the keyframe doesn't record how things moved, just where they moved to. Make sure you deselect the keyframe before moving on. You can do that by pressing the circle button. In the next step, I'll show you how to use your keyframe in the scene. Now that you've recorded a keyframe, let's look at how to activate it. See the trigger zone above the first platform? Select it with X to check its area of effect. OK, it looks like the zone stretches across the whole gap. Deselect it with the circle button. Then use the sticks or the grab cam to move in closer to the gadget. You'll notice an output port on its side, labelled Detected. This sends a signal when it detects a possessed puppet like Connie. We need to connect this to the keyframe, so select the port with R2 or X to create a wire. Then stretch it to the keyframe gadget with your imp and use R2 or X to connect the wire to the power port. Now the trigger zone signal will switch on the keyframe when it detects Connie. Try it out in play mode. Just press the options button and select the controller icon. See? As soon as Connie enters the trigger zone area, the block springs into place. Well, it works okay, but the animation's a bit fast, don't you think? We can do something about that after you take Connie across. Head back into edit mode. Rewind time with L3, and I'll show you how to add smoothing to the keyframe in the next step. Okay then, we've made a simple keyframe animation. Now it's time to smooth it out and make it look better. Like almost everything in Dreams, keyframes can be tweaked. So open this one's tweak menu, hold L1, then press the square button over it. You'll see two sliders at the bottom, slow power up and slow power down. These determine how long it takes for the keyframe to turn on fully. Hover over the slow power up slider now and hold X. Then move your imp to the right to increase the value. Let's set it to 1 second for now. You can set slow power down to any value you like. Then close the tweak menu by selecting the cross icon in the corner. Or you can hold L1 over the menu, then press the circle button. Let's see what that looks like in play mode. Ah yes, that looks a lot smoother. If you're happy with the new animation, switch back to edit mode. Rewind time with L3 and move on to the next step. It looks like the bridge across the next gap has collapsed. We could just move it back into place, but where's the fun in that? Let's perform a little bit of magic instead. Go to the Assembly menu and select another keyframe from the Animate menu. Stamp it above the gap with R2 or X. Now see if you can reassemble the bridge. Grab the first part and move it back where it should be. One of the great things about keyframes is that they can affect multiple objects. So you can put the other half of the bridge back too. Then select Stop Recording from the Context menu to store your changes. Once recording stops, the bridge will go back to its original position. So, select the keyframe with X if you want to see those changes again. I could have done a better job at positioning the bridge. Nothing to worry about though, because editing a keyframe is easy. Just select the Edit Keyframe button in the Context menu. It's got the same icon as a keyframe gadget. This allows you to make changes to the keyframe. You can remove things from a keyframe by pressing the triangle button over them. And now the bridges are back on the ground. Let's put them back into place, but this time, make sure they're a bit straighter. Remember, when you're grabbing things, you can realign them by pressing the triangle button. There we go. Much better. You can select Stop Recording again to finish editing this keyframe. Then move on to the next step when your bridge is in place. The bridge's new position is already stored in the keyframe, so all we need now is a way to activate it. That's where this trigger zone will come in handy. Let's select it to see what zone it covers. It's not in the gap this time. It's over this button. First, create a wire from the trigger zone's output using R2 or X. Then stretch it over to the keyframe and connect it to its power port. When Connie steps on the button now, the keyframe will be switched on. But what happens when she leaves the trigger zone? Let's test it in play mode to find out. Just as I thought. When Connie moves away, the keyframe switches off. Let's head back to edit mode and see what we can do about that. Of course, we could just move the trigger zone into the gap, but this is an animation tutorial. So let's see if we can use the keyframes tweak menu to fix the problem. Open it now with the L1 and square button shortcut and have a look at the options there. Hovering over the buttons will bring up their names. The one we're interested in is called Keep Changes. With this option turned on, any changes made by the animation will be permanent. So once Connie activates the keyframe, the bridge will stay in its new position until you rewind the scene. Since we're already in the tweak menu, let's add some smoothing to that animation. I think I'll set it to 2 seconds this time. Okay, time to close the tweak menu with L1 and the circle button. Then try out these changes in play mode. How's that for a magic trick? You can switch back to edit mode, rewind time, and experiment with the keyframe to see what else you can do. Maybe you could try keyframing a tweak menu setting, or animating some elements from the tutorial collection. When you're done, move on to the next step, and I'll show you how to use keyframes on a timeline. Keyframes are great for making simple animations. But if you want to make something more complex, you need a timeline. See that little block floating between the last two platforms? Let's use keyframes on a timeline to animate it. Start by selecting a timeline from the Animate menu. Stamp it down somewhere around the last gap. Then you can use the circle button to unequip the gadget. Now open the timeline, hold L1 over it and press X. This is the timeline canvas. You can move the canvas with your imp by grabbing it with R2. Numbers along the top are seconds, and you can see it set to 8 seconds by default. If you grab the edges with X, you can extend or shorten the canvas. Try setting it to around 6 seconds. If you ever need extra space to add more things, you can also extend the bottom of the timeline. Once you're comfortable with moving and resizing the timeline canvas, move on to the next step and we'll start adding things to it.